Now we're going to welcome and hear from our youth who will share with us their perspective on the search and recovered as intergenerational survivors. I would like to introduce Richard Pakak Pico from Nauyat, Nunavut. Oh, from Iqaluit, Nunavut. It says Nauyat here. And also Storm Cardinal, Fort Chipewyan, Métis, Alberta.
Megan Metz from Haisla Nation, BC, and Jody Tulurealik from Talukjoak, Nunavut. Welcome.
Welcome, and thank you for being here with us today.
I know it might be a little difficult, but if you can keep what you're saying under 15 minutes, just to give everybody else time. We will be starting with Storm. So, nakomik, tungasugitsi.
Welcome, Storm.
All right. Hello, my name is Storm Cardinal from, the introduction there. So I just wanted to start with, the residential schools. So my family has lost a lot of indigenous family values over time from the residential schools, like knowledge about the way we see each other, the way we speak to each other, or even our own native language. Not only the survivors of the residential schools, but their children were also weakened and affected by the residential schools. But even after the schools, the trauma was passed down to us through body language, tone, sometimes even abuse, and experienced by us through our families, whether it was parents or even our siblings. And I'd like to just talk about that today and what I've seen through my eyes as a child growing up and the similarity as to what others went through with the residential schools. As a son of a residential school survivor, I wasn't even sure what that school was in the community at the time or what it meant to many other people in my hometown. But as I got older, I was met with a teacher I knew back in my hometown who taught the children Cree, and one day while I was in class, we brought up the residential schools and missionary, and she came to us and she gave us what was my first opinion from a community member of what that school experience was like for them. And she also shared a bit about her mom attending that school before her. And as I got older, I heard more stories, more opinions, and it became more clearer and more intense as I collected and stored these experiences from elders in my community. And I got to really piece together what effects it has on the residential survivors and the youth today. And even after a while of hearing stories and getting an understanding of what it was that went on, I realized that I had to share my own experience to anyone, and I chose at the time to tell my best friend. And if I was to go back to when I was a child, I can recall many times that I had gotten what us, res families, called licking. I started to realize that what I had went through had some similarities. Oh, wait, I just rereading it to you. It was similar in a way, the abuse they went through with sticks or by hand. And I had my fair share of experience as a kid having to go to get my own willow, get whipped with, and you had to choose smart. Bigger was blunter and skinnier was the pain stung you longer. And by hand, it was different because it was face to face and yelling at times. Some was traumatic for me as a kid, and I can recall times where I had panic attacks as a child, and I would freeze in a corner while being yelled at and hit to the point where I couldn't cry anymore and just stood there, holding in my voice like my will to cry, listening to muffled growling because that's all I could hear. It follows them and even us while we are raised or raising our own. They learned what they were taught, and they taught the way they learned without even knowing. I thought that it was something that they would have experienced there, that their kids were experiencing now. Many kids grew up without experiencing a nurturing family life, whether their parents were always out drinking or were always out getting high on drugs maybe even left early on. And that leaves a toll, abandonment issues with young youth nowadays. It impacts them a lot, and most times they have no one to help them cope or to socialize with them when they're younger. So it's a lot harder to find themselves later on and end up getting mixed up in the worst things that get us stuck in that lifestyle. And some youth, even young adults, never find their way out of it. We never got the full experience, but we are experiencing the aftermath. Most end up passing on what they've learned and experienced from their parents, and it's basically a cycle that we hope to end one day. But another sad or rather devastating coping mechanism for some of the residential survivors used was that of what many used, including my father and I. And that was completely burying his memories and keeping only what he thought was good memories. There were traumatic experiences of abuse and mistreatment that he would rather bury his memories and choose to forget and feel numb, rather than to heal himself and be haunted every day thinking of, remembering the traumas of his past. And this usually leads to not having people recognize or acknowledge your pain, your story, and eventually never healing properly. My father was one to never show heartbreaking moments or painful past memories or anything emotional at all. He tries to remain a strong image for us and to not see his pain or even hear it. But I know it eats away at him from the inside, and it makes me wonder if I'll ever get his story. I also wish I could be up here today to even share a little bit about my mother's story, but unfortunately she had passed away when I was 10, which is well over 13 years now. And I never once got to hear anything about her younger life or experience with the schools. But until just recently that one of my aunties mentioned that she was a residential school survivor and that she had her own experience that was never shared, like many others who never got to come back home. It's not that it has anything to do with who they feel comfortable opening up to or in what environment that they may be comfortable in. Sometimes it's just the fact that some, including my father, just simply can't remember what they buried deep down inside. When I was growing up, just about at the age of 6, I learned what cigarettes were and what drugs, weed was. And I remember times when I was acting wrong in my household or causing domestic violence to my younger sibling, I would run away from home and smoke cigarettes and do drugs with kids I attended school with, who were all experiencing traumatic experiences at home. All of us were experiencing something that caused us to feel driven to abuse ourselves with drugs and alcohol, and eventually lead to my first time drinking alcohol. And I was 12 at the time when I stole from my dad alcohol, cigarettes, and I shared with who I called my friends. I remember my dad being so drunk that night under the table that I didn't even remember that I stole anything from him. And I still use drugs and alcohol today to cope with my own experiences as a child. Drug use, games, work, music, alcohol were only a few ways I forgot about pain. I'd do all these things over and over again until I would just eventually forget. And it helped me forget, yes, but it was always there. I can dig it up, feel hurt again, and then drink a week and bury it again. And I'm still fighting this very same battle now. These are only a few ways that I can cope with my anger, depression, anxiety, and I know a lot of youth in my own community who do the same with their family, coping instead of releasing the pain in a very comfortable and safe setting. I tend to wrap my head around things and over-contemplate on how I deal with any of my bad, sad, or mad situations, or even things that I worry about and overthink leads to me finding alcohol in my life again. I come from a loving household that wasn't all love and care from day one. We had struggles here and there with siblings where siblings were caught left and right and doing the same things, and we'd receive pressure in the household from parents and siblings. When we were growing up, I remember a few times where my mother and father would have us all sleep in the living room together, mainly because all of the kids were bad that day, but because it was easier to watch all of us in one room. But the main thing I remember is that we had to be very, very quiet to sleep, or my mother would hit us with a wooden spoon. And I remember that was the hardest thing because us as kids, we found it funny. So whenever we laughed, we'd all get it back to back. And us at the time, we didn't know what abuse was. My parents weren't very strict, but with parents who forced us physically to be better and to listen, it was hard to learn. But my father and late mother were also survivors of the residential school. And I got to ask my dad a bit about that, and if he thought it had anything to do with his experience in the school and how it was to be back in those days, those times in that school. He couldn't give me an accurate say. Mainly that it was very hard to be alone in there, no siblings, no parents, just the other kids and the priests and nuns. That was his family for around 6 years that he was there. He passed grade 7 and then they eventually closed it down. And it wasn't easy for anyone or him, not like to be the easiest to bury his memories. But I honestly think that the hardest thing to ever do, because I personally know how to do that. And even now, when I try to get him to open up about it, he says he honestly can't remember. And I would have preferred him to tell his story and to be heard. Some former students have positive memories of their time in residential schools, and certainly some might have been treated with kindness by the priests and nuns who ran the school as best they could given the circumstances. But even these good experiences occurred within a system aimed at destroying Indigenous culture and assimilating Indigenous students to bring them into conformity with their customs. I hope that all their voices are heard, and I encourage all of the youth of all the residential school survivors to speak up for themselves and to be honest and open to everyone around you. Friends, siblings, cousins, anyone who's willing to digest what you have to get off your chest. But thanks for listening to my voice, and I hope this helps inspire some youth to speak up about their experiences and to encourage them to share their stories just like me. Thank you.
Nakormek, would you like some Kleenex? Nakormek store, thank you for your story. Who would like to go next? Bakak?
Good afternoon. My name is Pakak. As introduced earlier, I'm from Iqaluit, not Nayat. I like Nayat though. I tried to speak about this at the Toronto gathering last March, but I was freshly grieving the loss of one of my friends. And now I'm also grieving the loss of another cousin because of suicide. And it just doesn't stop here, right? It's hard up here with suicide, addictions, and I feel like a lot of it comes from intergenerational trauma or experiences within residential schools or the federal day school system. Like in the last 12 months, I've lost 3 close friends and relatives, people I enjoy hunting on the land with. And one thing they all had in common was they had a family member or family members who were brought to residential school or federal day schools. So I kind of feel like whenever I get sad about it, I feel like the federal government or the churches, I feel like they won sometimes, because here we are in 2024, 2023, we're still losing kids. But that's not to go without saying that positive things are happening in our territory. Like there's an addiction treatment center, the Iqaluit, I think it is, a trail to a good life. They're opening an addiction treatment center here. We have the Embrace Life Council, which is, their mandate is suicide prevention, living, teaching Inuit the IQ principles. They provide funding and resources for land-based programming for youth. So those are some good things that are going on, but at the end of the day, sorry, I get lost when I think about it, but we're not at a place yet where we're still losing youth regularly. One of my good friends, he's from Talukyoak, Jake Olio, he passed away in March of last year. I was hoping his Auntie Betty would be here today so she can listen, but she wasn't feeling well. But she's also a survivor. And Jacob never really had a family growing up because his mother was also a survivor, but she died when he was young. And he never had a father. And I watched him struggle his whole life, right up until he passed away last year. I used to see myself as someone who'd want to help all the time. And I'd bring my friends and family on the land so they could try and heal in safe ways, but sometimes, when the big loss happens, you feel so set back, like I don't really go on the land anymore. I don't hunt as much or fish. It's because whenever I'm out there, I miss my friends. I guess, yeah, that was the message I wanted to say. So we're still losing kids. And we have to do more, even though there's stuff going on, but it's just it gets so centralized in the bigger communities, right? Like Iqaluit has centers going on, and we have programming here a lot, but in the smaller communities, they don't have what we have in town here, and that's where we're losing a lot of our relatives and our friends. So, I don't know, I guess that would be my message, is that we have to keep going for the youth. And it's really, it helps my heart when I see gatherings like this, because it's a shared experience. It's not just our community or me feeling like this. In every community, there's people suffering the way we are here. And it all traces back to one thing, it feels like. So, but when I see the survivors here, that turns away, because like I said earlier, sometimes when I'm sad, it feels like they won, but then I see the survivors here. We're still here, so they didn't win. Thank you.
Kuya Namipaka, for your story. That was very true and needed to be heard.
Jody.
Okay. Next is Jody.
Hello. My name is Jody from Talarak, Nunavut. First off, I'd like to thank the people that made this very important gathering happen, and to share our truth and perspective as intergenerational survivors. As an intergenerational survivor, I've had to fight the feeling of never being good enough, never feeling worthy of taking space and sharing my voice, my love, and intergenerational strength. I felt as if I had to stay put and small. Where do I get these feelings of self-doubt and fear? I've always felt isolated as an intergenerational survivor. I had no idea where I got all these scars that I was born with. I didn't choose to live this life with the after effects of attempted genocide. To be an Inuk individual means I'll live my life grieving for loved ones and parts of me that were taken away for me to experience living a life in the nomadic traditional way with no after effects of colonialism and genocide. But as I listen to the truth of generations before us and what they've been put through, it makes more and more sense to me as to why there are so many of us that experience trauma in cycles. a lot of our youth and the ones that experience these residential schools and dog slaughtering and everything else that we were put through, they turn to drugs and alcohol to numb the raw pain that we all know too well. Losing many loved ones and friends to substances, suicide. May we continue to share our truth so that the ones after us understand their background, and also the youth that are my age as well. Despite every harsh thing we've experienced as Indigenous people, we're still here, we're resilient, and everything our ancestors and we dream today for our people is totally possible and will happen with the generations to come. My only wish is that we can continue to thrive within our cultures, traditions, and always have pride in what we were once shamed for. I would also like to acknowledge that there are important leaders in this building right now, and I thank them for being here and listening to us. Yesterday, when one of the survivors from Cambridge Bay, yesterday during their survivors sharing circle, the thing that really stuck with me is what she said, that she'd like to see elder counselors, and it was said that there are these resources available, but she was denied access to that counseling because she was told that it cost too much. There wasn't any funding for her to receive the healing she wishes for. There are many instances where as Qedarmiut do not have access to resources that Iqaluit and Iqaluit have access to. I'd like to see more collaborative projects, spaces, and organizations between all the regions in Nunavut. It feels like we're left out a lot of the time when there's lots of talent, potential to heal and to thrive. And as Sylvia mentioned yesterday, we all heal and express ourselves in different ways. Personally, I write songs, sing, and cry to them until I feel a sense of healing, as well as going out to our pristine Nuna, reclaiming traditional ways. And I am fortunate to have my family that knows their traditional ways, and it's being passed down to me. But there are people within my community and my region who do not have that because it was taken away from them. And I'd like to see more of that for them. I see that there's some sewing projects and sewing, like they teach sewing within Iqaluit and Iqaluit, but that isn't really, there isn't a lot of that, especially like the traditional ways, like the traditional kamik and other traditional things like that. And yeah, I'd like to see more collaborative projects and things like that between the regions within Nunavut. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. That was very touching and meaningful. And these are our young voices that really will make a voice for the young. So I'm really thankful you guys are able to speak. Next, we'd like to invite Megan.
Okay. Yaut, hate mas, mus mujil, Iqaluit, Iqaluit, angwa. Nuch megan metsti, anduch geabekuch glayu. Geekrelens emots iche, hol nuch nugwa, isla nugwa. Hello, chiefs, matriarchs, community members, fellow Native peoples, and honored guests. My English name is Megan Metz. My Cha'isla name is Granduch. I come from Tzimotza, also known as Kitimat Village, on the northwest coast of BC, and I'm a part of the Blackfish clan in the Haisla Nation. Today, I would like to share a bit of my journey with you, my reflections, thoughts, and some things that I've learned while being a part of this work over the last year. I first attended one of these gatherings last January, the gathering in Vancouver. So it was almost exactly a year ago that I was sitting in my hotel room alone, nervous, questioning my place in this space, and wondering what I should speak about. I kept going back and forth with myself. Should I speak more technically regarding the archival work I've done, or should I speak more from the heart and share mine and my family's story? And part of me was terrified at the idea of being so vulnerable in front of so many people. But my k'ach, my inner voice or my intuition, it kept whispering to me and encouraging me that that's the direction I should take. And that voice got stronger and stronger until I made the decision that that's what I was meant to do with my time on this stage. After all was said and done, and I had shared my story, shed some tears, and felt I had said my piece, I was overwhelmed with the reactions I received. So many beautiful connections were made that day, and I returned home excited about the opportunities that laid ahead for me. That one speech completely changed the trajectory of my life last year. I experienced some of the best times of my life, but like all things in life, there must be balance. So I also experienced some of the lowest lows that I have lived in my life so far. For every peak, there's a valley. And while joy may feel so temporary sometimes, so is sorrow. I reached a point, though, where I could no longer ignore this tightness and this weight that I was feeling in my chest. It continued to grow. Self-doubt began to flood my mind, and again I found myself questioning my place in these spaces. Was I deserving of this? Was I worthy of it? Imposter syndrome had me holding myself back from connecting with these communities who wanted me to engage with their youth and wanted me to keep sharing my story. And I still struggle with imposter syndrome to this day, worrying about and nervous about what people might be thinking of me. There are times when you're made to feel that your dreams and the visions that you have are too big for this box that you've been placed in. And things like my anxiety, my tendency to overthink, my inability to ask for help, my fear of abandonment and rejection, all of these things had become just habits of mine that had slowly become ingrained in my mind. So these ideas that I had and these dreams, they just felt so far-fetched for where I was at in my life at the time. And as I was approaching my 25th birthday, my 25th year of life on this earth, it felt like a milestone. And at one point in my life, I wasn't really sure I'd even make it to that age. So I started to question myself on who I was and who I wanted to be. Did I want to continue to stand in my own way, let my fears get the best of me and keep my dreams a secret? Or did I want to continue to self-sabotage when new opportunities came up because I was scared of the discomfort and growth that would inevitably come with it? Why did I feel this way? Where does it come from? Much of the shame we carry is learned. This pain, it gets passed down to us. And most, if not all of it, can be connected back to these schools and institutions. Colonization demanded that we make ourselves smaller, that we were an inconvenience, a burden, a problem to be solved. These institutions and those that ran them truly believed that we were less than human, doomed to live a life of sin if they had not saved us and killed the Indian and the child. We were demonized, looked down upon for being who we were, shamed and punished for thinking, living, and speaking in ways that differed from their ideas of what life should be. Children were removed, ripped from their families, from all they had ever known, and forced to live lives absent of love, empathy, safety, and respect. Learning this history and truly beginning to unpack it all and try to understand it and how it has impacted my life, it felt like my world had been turned upside down. I started noticing these tendencies and these patterns in myself, my family, and my community. And now I was recognizing these things in real time as different things started happening. And realizing the root of all this behavior, I finally started taking things less personally. I finally realized that this shame that I've carried my whole life was never mine to begin with. My desire for perfection or nothing at all. My intense frustration and anger towards myself when I made mistakes. My need to follow the rules and the fear I had in my heart when I broke them. My struggles with self-doubt, the shame and confusion I felt about myself and who I am, it all comes from these schools and institutions. And when I reflect on my childhood and the times I'd experienced these feelings, I used to get all worked up about it, and I'd feel a lot of regret and guilt. But now I have to remind myself to take a step back and remember that I was doing the best that I could with what I knew at the time. My brain and my body were trying to protect me. I was trying to survive day to day, and really, at the end of the day, I was just a kid. Then I'm overcome by this wave of grief, because I remember, so were they. They were children, babies. Taken far from their homes and made to live lives that were filled with hate, abuse, and neglect. And now I realize these feelings that I had been carrying, they're the ripple effects of this mistreatment that are just showing up in our lives still today. And growing up, there were times that I felt deeply misunderstood. Like I didn't really fit in anywhere. It felt as if I had to navigate my troubles and my worries on my own, because any call for help would simply be a burden to those around me. I would often hide behind humor. I would make people laugh. I would make sure I'd listen and that everyone was feeling okay and doing good, because I didn't want anyone to feel the way that I did. I got really good at reading body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice, just looking for that reassurance that everything was okay. I realize now that this hyper-independence and this hyper-vigilance, it's learned. There are women in my life who were left to raise families on their own, who learned the only person they can rely on and trust is themselves. Women who were made to navigate a life surrounded by these cycles of abuse and addiction, left to find ways to keep themselves and their children, their families, safe. And this too stems from these schools, where cries for help and attempts of sharing truth were often dismissed, outright denied, and were seldom followed up with and resolved. This left them to cope with the aftermath of their trauma alone, suffering in silence, feeling as if it is them against the world, with little to no one in their corner. So better understanding this history, it can help us better understand ourselves, our families, and our community dynamics. Acknowledging these cycles currently in place can help raise our awareness of them. Then education and proper, sustainable support systems can then help bring them to an end. Through education, we can begin to help our youth and our people find their voices through language, strengthen their identity through culture, and feel a sense of belonging and connection to land and community. We have lost a lot due to the different struggles we have faced as a people, and that pain and loss should be acknowledged and felt. At the same time, we cannot forget all that we have held on to in spite of these very intentional efforts to strip us of who we are. What remains is ours to carry forward, ours to nurture and grow, ours to add to and pass on to the next generations. We no longer need to hide those parts of ourselves or leave them at the door when entering certain spaces. For example, I used to hate when my res accent or my res slang would slip out in conversations or in spaces where there weren't many Native people. But now, I love when it happens. I realize that our accents that we have are simply traces of our native languages making their way into the English that we speak. Even if your native language wasn't your first language, or you don't speak it right now, generations before you had the muscle memory made for speaking it. And many of us were raised by fluent speakers, so their accent became our own. And although English was forced upon us, our languages still fight their way into our speech patterns through these accents that we have. This is our way of expressing self. So don't hide it. Celebrate yourself. Celebrate every aspect of yourself. Do not let this world dim your light. Do not shy away from the beauty and power you all carry as First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We have not only ourselves, but all of our ancestors behind us. They believe in us. They love us. They endured so much for us to still be here today. So let us honor them, remember them, respect them and their stories. They are us and we are them, because as we know, everything is connected. One day, all of us will be the ancestors that the upcoming generations will speak of. So we should in turn honor ourselves, remember who we are, and respect ourselves and our stories. As we continue to have these discussions, it's important that we create safe and brave spaces where youth, elders, survivors, and community can feel the full extent of their emotions as they arise while learning and unpacking this history together. The importance of mental health and cultural supports through every stage of this process has been mentioned time and time again. And it's our belief as Khaisla people that crying is one of the first steps you take in your healing process, especially in the time of grief and loss. So when these emotions arise, allow yourself the time and space to feel what needs to be felt. Reach out to your loved ones and your support systems for help and guidance. Though these types of conversations are often difficult and uncomfortable, it is in this discomfort that we learn more about ourselves and each other. And through that learning, we grow as people. It is in this discomfort that we find new ways forward, and we can begin to let go of this shame, this anger, whatever it may be, because it was never ours to carry. This is what I've learned this past year. Also, the importance of giving ourselves grace through these incredibly challenging times. Many of us are in the process of remembering how to love ourselves and each other. There is no one way to be. There is no one way to heal. There is no one way to go about this work. We have such diverse beliefs, customs, protocols, and teachings in this room alone. Even more so when we extend this conversation to all nations and all people across what many refer to as Turtle Island. So my advice would be, listen to your qaf, your inner voice, your intuition. Strengthen your connection to it and learn to trust it. And listen to your wasam, your heart. These will always guide you towards what feels right for you, your loved ones, and your community. Anaft auch nagutla, I thank you for this time here today. I appreciate you all for the important work that you do, and I want to remind you that you are valued, you are loved, and that together we are making a difference in our communities. Thank you. Wow.
Thank you.
Nakurmik, thank you so much for sharing your story. You know, I sadly went to a funeral a week and a half ago, and the young person that we lost, we called her our future ancestor. And I love that, because you guys are also our future ancestors. Thank you for your message. It's very important what you guys are saying, because we can all resonate with what your message is and how you feel. You're really not alone.
Please continue to thrive. Please continue to share your stories. Be a voice for the young, because you are our future. I only encourage you all to keep doing what you're doing, and I'm so proud of you guys for being able to tell your stories here.
Nakurmik, thank you. There were some very important messages that our young people shared. And I hope you feel all the love in the room. I can really appreciate what they say because we can all, they're coming from a perspective of young people who weren't at residential school, so they didn't have that experience, but their experience in life is also very important to share. They are very emotionally present, which is a really positive thing. They are speaking their truth. They are talking about very difficult things from what they see, and sometimes these things are not talked about.
From
So-
here, I hope they be that voice to be heard and passing on those traumatic histories that their parents faced or other people in their families, and have that broken silence taken away. And I only encourage them more and more.
And I think one thing that's very important to support our young people is not to be too bureaucratic about how to help them, right? If they want to do a project for their community or for their friends to heal, it shouldn't have to be too complicated to do that, because our pain is all connected to our past and the experiences that we collectively go through. So I'm saying this because when I was a young person, I wish someone said that.